Steam engines alive. Now where we stopped. Oh no, he's alive.
I don't think anyone, or very few people, can realise what it's like at speed. It's a tremendous noise. But that's all part of the glamour of it, all the steam and the smells of the oil, the motion, and I say the racket, the dust, it's all part of the job. And you either liked it or you didn't.
The sounds of the countryside have changed since the steam days. Every engine had its own rhythm, its own character, and it was hard to be indifferent about your local railway. One which is remembered with special affection is the Somerset and Dorset Joint Railway. For 111 years, it chugged its way through the changing countryside, linking the waters of the Bristol and English channels. The men who worked on it and loved it remember their days on the S&D quite clearly. They called it the Swift and Delightful, but it was probably better known by its less complimentary nickname.
Some say we were slow and dirty, maybe so, but we still done a jolly good job, I thought.
On the Somerset and Dorset at the break of their day, you could leave Bath for Bournemouth by the very best way. Go through Wellow to Binniger and to Shillingstone fair town. Stop at Malmesbury or Baileygate on the rolling Wessex down, singing to-roll-roll-de rifle, slow and dirty, serene, delightful. Come with me and have an eyeful of the S&D Railway.
We never ran through a big town. The only town of any size we skirted was Shepton Mallet and Blandford. And it was lovely. I mean, you take in the spring. We came up from Poe up to Broadstone, and then we'd go down the Corfmullen bank. We shoot down the bank, give up the tablet at the bottom, swing round the corner, and there on the left-hand side was a coppice. And it was nothing but a mass of blue bluebells, just like a purple sea. And it was fascinating to see it. And then at the same time of the year, you'd be climbing the Mendips. You'd come up through Windsor Road Tunnel. Perhaps you'd had a sweat in the Windsor Road Tunnel, and you'd come climbing up the tunnel. And just as you turned to the left, the sun would be coming across, catching the edge roller. And you'd look down, and there'd be a small bunch of primroses in the shelter of the edge in the bright sunlight, and you thought, oh, great, spring have come at last, and it was beautiful. And then the look down all over the Vale of Avalon, the Glastonbury Tor, and if the tide was in, you'd catch a glimpse of the sea. It was a beautiful landscape, yes. And don't matter what kind of a sweat you had on the bank, you look out something. Oh, that looks nice across there today, and it was all spice to the game.
And so the driver working the Somerset and Dorset every day got to know his section of line as a friend whose attractions grow as you get to know him better. In many cases, that friendship started in childhood.
I used to go in the signal box at Binniger, and I remember one time Father used to let me put the signals back. And one day, at 1 o'clock-ish, I put the signal back in front of the train, and he stopped. Father had to explain what happened.
I announced when I was around about 11 years old, 12, and I wanted to be an engine driver, much to my parents' amazement. They were horrified, actually.
Well, with the glamour of steam, the smell and the movement, came the noise and the dirt, and some parents would have preferred clean jobs for their sons. but for many youngsters of 14 or 15, working on the Somerset and Dorset was a family tradition.
Father came home from work and he said, "What about coming on to the railway?" He said. It was hard work. I had to assist with the coaling of the engines, and being a boy of 15, I had to get up into the coal trucks and shovel this coal out into the tubs. So when the tubs was full, I had to go up on the crane and help wind it up, swing it round over the tenders of the engines, and then we had to tip these tubs. For these tubs held about 10 hundredweight of coal. And when you put about 20 of these onto one tender, you had enough.
Work on steam trains was hard. Most men joined the S&D as cleaners, and while they were assigned to the sheds, they were expected to help with all kinds of jobs, fitting brake blocks or stacking coal. But their main work was cleaning the engines, a task which 4 men would carry out with great precision and care.
One would wipe over the boiler with a clean cloth or a brush. The next one would follow on behind, sprinkling paraffin all over the boiler and firebox. Then the second one, finishing brushing off, he'd come behind with a piece of cloth. He'd wipe the paraffin in all over and wipe the dirt off. Then the man that was sprinkling the paraffin on would come behind with a clean cloth and wipe it off clean. And then this next man round again, he'd come with a piece of clean tallow and a wad of cotton wool, and he'd smear that on and then rub it in and finish off with horizontal strokes and then vertical strokes down each end of each boiler section. And while he was doing that, the other man would go round to the foreman's cabin where there was a big tank of thick black oil, and he'd put a dirty big cloth, cotton waste in there and just squeeze it out slightly and bring it back and mop all over the smoke box from top to bottom till she was lovely black and shiny. And then the man that was doing the smoke box, he still had this big black heavy piece of waste thick oil in it. He looked round for ways and means of disposing of it. Of course, you could throw it into the firebox out the way if you like, but the main thing was to do, you'd be still stood on top of the chimney, holding onto the chimney, and you'd be looking over the different roads till you've seen some unsuspecting cleaner or someone like that, and you would let it go, and as soon as it left your hand, you was down onto the floor underneath the engine and come up the pit the other end and walk up through, and there he was, perhaps with the black oil all trickling down his neck, and you'd say how sorry you were and put your arm round his neck and help to wipe it in a bit further. And of course there he was, breathing fire and vengeance on everyone. But still, we all had it in turn, and it was one of the happy episodes in the day.
A cleaner would eventually leave the sheds to work on the line on a moving train. He joined the footplate staff as a fireman, and the success of the journey depended as much on him as on the driver.
If you were on express trains, it was extremely hard work. One was responsible for feeding the fire, keeping the water level in the boiler, the steam pressure up. And for example, on a trip to Bath on the Pines Express, with say 12 coaches on, one would shovel something like 3 tons of coal, I suppose, between Bournemouth and Bath, which we moved in a period of about just over 2 hours. So, as you can see, if you had to shovel that sort of quantity of coal, and it's all done on a moving platform, travelling at high speed, and so from that point of view, it was quite demanding. You had to keep the steam pressure right up, otherwise the driver would give you some anxious looks, and you assisted the driver in the sizing of signals, keep the footplate clean, and so on. All sorts of things used to go wrong. Sometimes the engine wouldn't steam properly due to bad coal, perhaps the fire was dirty, tubes dirty. Then, of course, one would have to struggle. One sort of fired hard and used all the fire irons, like, poking up the fire. But despite all one could do, the pressure would drop back. And then, of course, it was the skill of the engineman, then, the driver, who would try and coast whenever possible. And it was a teamwork job then to get through with the steam that one had available. But if the worst happened, then of course one could come to a stand just through shortage of steam, which was most embarrassing.
Oh, it's hot here and it's dirty on the good old footplate. I am stoking and I'm shoveling, 'cause as usual we're late. Will we ever reach, ever creech for the Bridgewater line? Give a whistle and a shovelful, now the engine's riding fine, singing Toro-ro-de-rifle, slow and dirty, serene, delightful. Come with me and have an eyeful of the S&D Railway.
The fireman certainly had the thrill of working on a train which could be travelling at 70 miles an hour, but even that couldn't match the excitement felt by the man at the controls, the man in charge.
You see, when you were a driver, you were the captain of the ship, as it were. You didn't have anybody sort of overseeing you. You were your own boss. It was just yourself and the fireman, and you were in charge of him. So you had that responsibility, and one felt it, but one was happy to have this responsibility, obviously. But as regards to Somerset and Dorset itself, well, yes, it was an extremely difficult line. It demanded great skill from the engineman. Basically, this was because of the steep gradients which had to be climbed, and although the Somerset and Dorset abounded in these steep gradients, one would have thought possibly that the trains weren't too heavy, but in fact the trains were extremely heavy, particularly during the summer months, when one would normally get 10, 11, 12 coaches, which would weigh something like 400 tons on the back of the engine. And so, of course, climbing these gradients, the engines had to be handled extremely sensitively to avoid slipping. If the engine slipped on a wet rail, for example, well, of course, if the driver couldn't gain control, one could easily be pulled to a standstill on the heavy gradients, such as climbing over the mendips. And so, from this viewpoint, it demanded great skill from the driver, and, of course, it demanded great skill from the fireman also to keep up the steam pressure necessary for this extremely hard work. And of course, I think this again is part of the sort of interest of the Somerset and Dorset. One could see locomotives working extremely hard as you're likely to see an engine work anywhere in the country.
And it was those hills which made the engines work so hard, which gave the drivers their favourite moments on the Somerset and Dorset.
I started at Evercreek Junction. Evercreek Junction to Masbury, 1 in 50 approximately. And of course we went down at 1 in 50 to Radstock. We had our ups and downs, We used to do, mainly, from Radstock, we used to do banking mainly. And very often you would get into a little bit of trouble in the steam at the back, and the driver at the front, perhaps was fully aware of that, and he did have a bit of fun sometimes, and he eased back, and he was in a little bit of a hole, but it was jokingly done, mainly.
And then one day I was working the pines with Bert, and we climbed the mendips up the top of the Masbury, and as we turned over the top, or stepped off his side and come over to my side, he said, "Here, take her in the bath." And that was a thrill, the first time to take the pines in the bath on your own.
Treasured memories, but there were occasions which the drivers recall with feelings of relief rather than pleasure. Some were narrow escapes when somebody might have been killed. Others weren't quite so serious.
It was like Windsor Tunnel once. I'd come down with a drive from Bath, England, I think his name was. And I hadn't been there all that long, and do you know the way down here, son? You know what his speed is at Windsor Tunnel, which was a single-bore tunnel? Yeah, that'd be all right. Now, we were running a little late. I kept the speed, but as I rushed into this single-bore tunnel in the dark, I heard a clatter, bang, dust flying, and I didn't know what had happened until I come out the other end, and all the floorboards had blown up in the air, and all the dust were blown, all the wooden floorboards you stood on. Then I realised, well, you didn't want to go through too fast. One was there was a permanent speed restriction. I think it was 40 mile an hour. And secondly, if you went too fast anyhow, you got covered in ashes and the floorboards would blow up.
Coombe Down Tunnel was a single-line tunnel, about a mile and 96 yards long, I think. I think we got about a mile through it one night, coming up on a rather heavy goods train. 60 wagons on. A dear old number 7. I couldn't tell you what number it was, I haven't a clue now. We didn't get all the way through. And it got rather unpleasant, to say the least. It was very, very, very hot. And we had a truck of cattle next to the engine, if I remember. And I always remember these cattle really bawling and shouting sort of thing. It was pretty terrifying for them. It must have been, in the blackness and the heat. You couldn't breathe. The only way you could breathe was sort of down on the floor and then come up again and try something else. I was a very young bath cleaner then. It must have been about 1953, end of 52, 53, I suppose. And in the end, Bill said, we've had enough of this, and back out we went, back down to the telephone outside the box, and then told the signalman at Midford we were coming back and we wanted assistance in. And we got down there and stopped outside the signal box at Midford. And Harry was on, if I remember rightly, and he had a can of tea or a cup of tea going when we got down there. I always remember that cup of tea. It was about the sweetest thing I'd ever had. It was really glorious.
We work in the 810, what we call mixed train, from Glastonbury to Bridgewater. And engine, one coach, about 15 to 20 trucks of coal and a guards van. It was a complete train. And we left Glastonbury at 8:10, and I was jogging on through the moors about 25, 30 mile an hour, I suppose, and a very thick, heavy ground fog mist. Couldn't see anything at all on ground level, and the sun was shining beautiful. It sounds incredible, but the sun was shining beautiful, but the thick ground fog. And it meant I had to look out of the top window instead of lean out over the side like was our normal practice. And by doing this, I could see over the top of this fog. Jogging on, all unconcerned, I think my mate was doing a bit of fire and chucking the coal on. And all of a sudden, there was a terrific collision. And a big blinding flash of flame shot by both sides of the engine. Both of us, through the impact, was thrown against the firebox, and the engine started jumping about as though, well, off the road he was. Not knowing what had happened and being frightened by it, we didn't know what to do or what it was. So we stood there, and all of a sudden I see the engine turn and go down over the bank. And at the same time I said to my mate, jump! And I jumped over the side down onto the ground, and he followed me. And when we picked ourselves up and looked around, of course we couldn't see no engine in that. So we wondered what had happened, and when we did see her, she was lying right across the river, the Reen, and the tender was on the bank, the engine was in the river, the coal wagons was off the road, the coach was off the road. After a few minutes, I walked back a little ways, and I saw the guard of the train, and I said to him, whatever's happened? And he said, well, there's a chap up here, he said, he've hit my diesel. So, within a matter of minutes, then, there was numerous people come out from the peat works, which was on the right-hand side, and it was explained to us then what had happened. This little diesel had to cross over our lines to get into the peat field, and as he was on our track, he couldn't go no further because his little wheels were spinning with the dampness on the fog and the dampness. And not knowing what to do, the chap just had to leave it there, and he heard us coming, and he just stood back out the way. That was the only thing he could do. We crashed anyway.
That kind of excitement is part of the history of the Somerset and Dorset, but it was quite a rare event. The S&D was very much a peaceful country railway.
Years ago, we used to get the moors flooded from Anspel Crossing to Sharpham Crossing near Glastonbury. All that was underwater. Years ago, it was said, not in my time, but I've heard old drivers say that they used to run specials from my bridge for to go skating on the ice at Shatway. Oh, another one was we were going to Burnham the passenger train, and along by the clay pits there was a swan in the middle of the line, and it wouldn't shift. So the driver stopped, he got down, and he made a grab for the swan, caught him round the bottom of the neck, and threw him off the line, and we then proceeded. Quite a lot we saw between Eddington Junction and Shatwick. They come up there for the winter, and one day I counted no less than 53 swans along on the river running between Eddington Junction and Shatwick. In fact, there was one between Shatwick and Ashcott. It was lame, had an injured wing, and it actually built its nest on the side of the Ree, and hatched the young there.
Perhaps it was the rural character of the Somerset and Dorset Railway that gave it its rather special atmosphere. Even after nationalisation, the railwaymen all felt as though they were part of one big family.
When working up on the first train, what would now be termed a commuter train, the first train from Templecombe in the mornings, running into a station, you knew all the regulars, everybody. And, okay, so Mary was a little bit late at Chilcompton, you waited for her. You knew she was coming. It'd be only a couple of minutes. You gave her like 2 minutes. You could make that up on the way somehow. Running into Shoscombe, certainly with all my mates, coming over the viaduct towards Shoscombe, we always blew the whistle, just to wake them up a little, you know, and get them running down that hill. Because by then, somebody else had been late at Mitchell Norton or Radstock, and you were a few minutes down, and you had to make it up, so you couldn't afford to wait at Shoscombe as well. And this is the sort of thing that went on. Certainly, when I was a pass cleaner, I was living at Oakhill and working in Bath, and I was push-biking backwards and forwards every day, 15 miles each way. Unless I was very lucky, certain drivers, there used to be a train at 10 o'clock or thereabouts at night, and if I was lucky, catch that train, I'd stick the bike on the guardsman, this was a freight train, and the driver would say, I'll slow up through Vinegar, and he would. I'd just hop off with the bike and 2 miles push instead of 15, it was glorious. This was a sort of atmosphere which prevailed.
I think everybody were afraid now all up through there. We'd stop at the gates and put down water or pick up the empty cans. I think you might have a cup of tea or a glass of wine. I remember one Christmas when the Bridgewater branch was open, we went to the first crossing, put down some water, and I said to the wife, her husband was a porter, and so I said to her, your husband said I could have a glass of wine. Oh, she went off the deep end. She said, he's sending everybody out here, she said. You have a glass of wine. So she said, you better have the bottle, she said, and finish. Oh, about that much in the bottle. Oh, next day, I run into Eddington Junction. God, she called me to kill me for that. But it passed.
You knew everyone. I mean, you'd get these little crossing keepers right out in the middle of the fields, miles from anywhere. Well, you get a cold winter's morning, you know, and you think, oh, blimey, perhaps they're comb on them come. How can they get, hey, peek on the lamps there, and yeah, hey, kick a couple off when we go by Mrs. Ozet's house, and of course off a couple goes, and then we get nearly in the Shillingston. There was another permanent wayman there in his cottage, and they had some chickens and that, and one morning she'd come out, she said like that, all right, when we come back down, kicked off some more, and eventually all the way up through.
That driver, Donald Beale, had worked on the Somerset and Dorset for 47 years, and with the other engine men, he looks back with affection on the line which gave him his livelihood for so long. But their memories are tinged with regret too.
Oh, they closed us in 66 'cause they said we didn't pay. And I suppose it's just politics that sent us away. They still miss us in Henstridge, and it's not quite such fun for the folk in Charlton Marshall. Now their railway doesn't run, singing Toll-roll-roll-de-rifle, slow and dirty, serene, delightful. Folk are tearful now and sighful for the S&D Railway.
I finished work and I was off in the evening, so we all went down the Royal at Templecoombe, and I think there was a few nearly to tears. In fact, there were one or two like Art Hatcher. I think it broke his heart really when the Somerset and Dorset, because him and his dog was down there. Where Art was when he was off duty, his dog was. But we saw the last train out, somewhere 8:50 or 9 o'clock at night to Bath. And there was a landlord of the pub came up and played the last post on the Templecoombe station, and it was packed from end to end. But when that train had gone, there wasn't an engine left at Templecoombe.
The last day of the Somerset and Dorset, as such a last normal working day, I can remember very vividly. I was the relief shed foreman, and my job basically was to, as each engine came on the shed from down the line, was to get it in, get it disposed of, fire dropped, and put it back in the shed, virtually bury them. To somebody who'd been, the only job he'd known was with steam locos, it was very, very disappointing, almost one could say, I suppose, agonising, to see so much going just for scrap.
I was working the first down passenger to Templecoombe that day. Well, at Glastonbury we had a stopping time of 10 minutes. And it was a 12-coach train, and I don't think I've seen so many cameras in my life. They were all out taking photos. And on our arrival at Highbridge, they got out, but they weren't allowed to roam over the line. We ran round the train and turned the engine, and when I got to Highbridge, after I turned the engine, I was relieved for another set of men to take it back. And of course then, it was it. I don't know if this was the end. And I walked around, and the shed doors were open, and I closed them, and I thought to myself, wow, the end of a lifetime.
Serene and Delightful was a portrait of the Somerset and Dorset Joint Railway, which closed on March the 6th, 1966, ending the steam age in the West Country. In the programme, you heard the voices of Donald Beale, Pat Evans, David Massey, Bill May, Bill Rolls, Peter Smith, Ray Stokes, and George Whedon. Reminders of the S&D's history can be seen at the Somerset and Dorset Railway Museum Trust in Washford in Somerset, and at the East Somerset Railway at Cranmore. The song Serene and Delightful was written and performed by Richard Graves. The programme was presented by Roger Bennett and produced by Mary Saunders.
It was hot. It was hard. It was a hell of a good time. It really was. There's times when I could have thrown it straight out the window, but on balance, yeah, I certainly enjoyed myself. I'd go back tomorrow.